Check that our link to top producer Susie is up and running as the drinks trolley, I think, is just coming into...
Oh, yes.
Coming into view. Just grab it there, leave it there, David. Thank you. What are you choosing for us today?
I've grabbed a rum today
Yes.
from Venezuela. Diplomatico is excellent for sipping or grating cocktails. So whatever you fancy, perfect for your Monday evening.
Thank you very much indeed. There's a top tip from Suze. Always drink responsibly. Just like they're doing confessions. I don't think so. Anyway, Knuckles sends in today's confession. Thanks, Knuckles. Father Simon, Brother Matt, Sister Susie. Today I seek forgiveness for an unfortunate situation that occurred not on these shores and very far from home. It was the noughties, and until a few months before the incident in question, I'd been living a successful, if rather bland, life. I had the job, I had the house, I had the car, but I was questioning my life choices and whether all this materialism with its overrated central heating, hot showers and wardrobes full of plentiful clothes was really for me. So I did what all sensible people should do, and I quit my job, sold my car, rented my house and bought a round-the-world ticket and a backpack. Time to grow my hair, put on a pair of fisherman pants and tie a smelly piece of string around my wrist. I am going travelling. I wasn't like your average gap year student, says Knuckles. I was older than many of my fellow travellers and, blessed with the proceeds from the sale of my car, was able to enjoy the full benefits world travel can offer. I did a road trip across the US, I abseiled through waterfalls in Costa Rica, I hiked to Machu Picchu in Peru, I sambaed in Brazil, and I skydived in New Zealand. I eventually arrived in Southeast Asia, which is where my confession takes place. I was determined to seek a path less travelled, and this is how I ended up in a town in the north of Laos. I boarded a bus to take me on the journey. My seat was a sack of potatoes, despite generating a considerable dust plume as it bounced along a red earth dirt road. The bus company clearly didn't think that oiling the windows to allow them to close was a worthy endeavour. The bus was mainly full of local people, but there was a handful of intrepid fellow travellers, and to my surprise, at first glance at least, some of us seemed to have something in common. Lone male travellers in their 30s. I had found my tribe. We arrived in the town and bonded over a beer or three and stories of diarrhoea. Standard traveller fare, as you understand. And then, softened by the effects of maybe my third bottle of cold beer, two of the more adventurous of my tribe, let's call them Bear and Jock, convinced me to go on a mountain bike ride the next day. Jock was sporty, the kind of person that ran half marathons for fun. He knew where to find an entrepreneurial local man who would rent us our bikes. Bear was a chisel-jawed Californian who thrived on survival pursuits. He had an endless supply of positivity and hyperbole. Awesome. I was unfit and on the grumpier side of life, especially if deprived of food. The next day I reluctantly joined Jock and Bear as we set off on our bicycle adventure. If the previous day's bus journey had been uncomfortable, it was nothing compared to how my trouser area felt after 2 hours of gusset rubbing. Jock and Bear were well ahead of me when eventually we arrived in what felt like an oasis in the rising heat of the day, a small town. The grimace that was now etched on my face must have painted 1,000 words, none of them pleasant, because both Jock and Bear were quick to accept my plea to refuel on food and water. As we cycled further into the town, I finally spotted my Nirvana. Like the rest of the houses in town, it was a humble wooden structure, but inside it was full of people sitting down and tucking into bowls of rice and fish stew. This is the place for us. We walked in. This wasn't the place for us. It was as though the piano player had stopped and every face turned to look at us with sombre disdain. There was a counter where the food was being served by the only friendly-looking face in the room, a slender lad in his 20s. I walked over to him and frantically pointed at a bowl, some rice, then the fish stew, and finally my mouth. I rounded off my mime with a big smile and an enthusiastic rub of my belly. Boom! The message landed and the three of us ignored the room full of eyes firmly fixed on us to perch at the only empty table where I promptly wolfed down the meal. There is nothing like exercise to fuel a healthy appetite, so I returned to the counter to get a refill. Delicious. Jock eventually turned to me and said, "We should pay." Having connected with the lad at the counter, I returned to settle our tab. Once again, I pointed enthusiastically at the food, pointed at my mouth, but he looked confused. I tried again, but this time with more exaggerated actions. He looked more perplexed and then signalled to a girl in the room in her late teens. She walked over and he muttered something to her. I started my game of charades once again, but she quickly tapped my arm and interrupted. "You speak English?" she said. Hallelujah, I thought. Yes, I said, smiling like the Cheshire Cat. "We love your restaurant and your food. We had 4 bowls of fish stew and now we'd like to pay." The girl looked confused. Must be my accent. Easily solved. Every Brit abroad knows if you're not understood the first time, what you need to do is to speak loudly and slowly.
Of course.
"We had 4 bowls of fish stew and now we want to pay." I reached for my wallet. She quickly raised her hand to stop me, and then the words that have haunted me until this day. "You no pay, it's my uncle's funeral." Father Simon, Brother Matt, Sister Susie, I seek forgiveness not from the people whose funeral wake we'd interrupted with shared fish stew. Despite our language barrier, the joke was on us. After the meal, we were welcome to stay. We became minor celebrities.
Wow.
Now I seek forgiveness from the local entrepreneur who rented us the bicycles that were eventually returned a day late. He had clearly invested a large sum of his savings in the business, not to have the worry that some reckless foreigners had done a runner with the bikes and his next customers would be left without wheels. Father Simon, Brother Matt, Sister Susie, please exercise your compassion and remove the burden of guilt that has plagued me for all these years. Well, it's a fine tale, and our first, I believe, from Laos.
Yeah.
They were very excited. However, it didn't go quite the way they expected, but it seems as though it turned out in the end. Sister Susie, the voice of responsibility.
Well, Knuckles, I don't know what to say. You should have known when you walked in, the piano shop played. Surely, you must have been able. There must have been some clues that it was a funeral. It must have been. And yeah, wow, you could have just left a donation maybe, but I just don't think I can forgive you because that is shocking. Absolutely shocking. I can't.
Brother from another.
Was there any? What kind of clue? Unless there's a coffin literally in the room,
Formal dress,
would you know?
Black tie, maybe not in Laos.
Been in a formal dress.
Oh, that's hilarious! I love that. It's super. What a payoff! You don't pay. It's my uncle's funeral. Oh, superb! I'm
And then
definitely forgiving.
they stayed and have a few more beers afterwards.
I love that. What a tale! Brilliant. Well done.
Okay, so the question is, do you forgive Knuckles? It appears as though the people in this particular house in Laos, the house in Laos, radio feature of that definitely, seem to be quite forgiving, and they were at the funeral.
Yeah, so
but maybe you take Sister Susie's line. I don't know.
Maybe.
The people's verdict is expected. You text 61054, start your message with Simon. Was a corker from Knuckles. He was travelling around the world. He was in Laos, exhausted, thought he'd found a fantastic cafe restaurant where he and his mates had some fish stew. Turns out to be someone else's funeral. And the people's verdict is in, and here it comes.
Everyone is forgiving tonight. Jerry, completely forgiven. There is nothing which will beat an Englishman abroad. I'm with Brother Matt on this one. I roared with laughter. Philip, I agree with Matt. Forgiven for the line, you don't pay, it's my uncle's funeral. Didn't see that coming, still laughing. And Amanda and the cats in St. Helens says, sharp intake of breath, jaw dropped. But I forgive Knuckles as he needs forgiveness for this faux pas. Even the cats stopped when they were doing for this one. Absolutely the best confession yet.
Yes, it's interesting because it's actually most confessions don't have a punchline, but pay, it's my uncle's funeral is about as close as we're going to get. And so Knuckles, whoever Knuckles is, gets the smart speaker. If you would like tomorrow, send us a confession, please. Maybe a funeral confession, backpacking confession, anything. Confessions at greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Another one tomorrow.
Right. You'll have lots of fun with Ken. You can tell us all about it on Thursday.
I will certainly do that. Here we go. It's confession time. Today's comes from Richard. Actually, what's interesting about this confession is that it's a follow-up to a confession that we had last week.
Okay.
I also noticed that we just need a little.
There's the trolley coming in.
To start with drinks. What are you choosing from the drinks trolley?
I've got a nice can of Big Drop, which is alcohol-free. They're Paradiso Citra, which is very fruity and delicious, and it's also gluten-free, which I like very much.
Nigel's brought those in before, the Big Drop.
Yeah, Nigel likes the Big Drop, but they've got a real selection now, and they're all gluten-free. So yeah, excellent, and alcohol-free. So
Thank you.
sin-free.
Richard
Enjoy it.
says, sinning is what we're talking about here. Nicely worked in. Simon and cohorts. You already know me via another confession, and because of that confession, I need to get something off my chest. I have been a lifetime fan of Manchester United. I live, breathe and sleep the Red Devils. We had a good weekend and are considerably better than Liverpool or Spurs for that matter.
Okay.
Lack of forgiveness, I guarantee.
Guaranteed.
If you haven't guessed yet, my name is Richard, in inverted commas. In other words, it's not Richard.
No.
And my best friend is known on your show as Kevin. He is the guy who got a wheelchair from Bobby Charlton, but was all grumpy and everything because Sir Bobby made a joke about his beloved Newcastle United. You remember that?
I do remember that, yeah.
Sulky.
Exactly. Well, how petulant he was, says Richard. You'll remember that my hero was and still is Sir Bobby Charlton. So when I heard that my friend, this is back in the day, was going to be presented with a wheelchair by the living legend, Sir Bobby, I had to get his autograph. This, Richard said he would do, but as your listeners heard last week, he'd been in such a strop because of that joke, he did not feel he could ask Sir Bobby for a signature. So to escape this embarrassing position, he faked Bobby Charlton's signature, a sin for which he should probably go to the Tower, and then he gave it to me. You should have seen my 13-year-old face, Father Simon, when he presented me with the autograph over 20 years ago. It took pride of place in my room, then in my flat, and then in my family home over the years. Literally, everyone who visited anywhere that I lived was shown this fabulous souvenir. I even had it framed and had it mounted rather expensively, I have to say. I mean, Sir Bobby never allowed half measures, did he? You don't keep his signature in a book, in a drawer. You frame it and put it on a wall. Everyone was impressed, I have to say. I had family pictures, nice knickknacks from around the world, souvenirs, you know, but nothing like the framed autograph of my hero.
Okay.
Until, and this is where my confession comes in, I started to struggle financially, and with a heavy heart decided that I had to sell my prized possession of that very framed autograph. As you can imagine, I didn't arrive at this position easily, but with a very heavy heart indeed. It was like selling a holy relic, or the bones of your grandfather.
What? No, I don't think that we'd never done that.
That bit
No,
doesn't
don't do
work.
that.
I don't think bones of your grandfather would get anything at all. Anyway, like selling a holy relic, I understand that. Desperate times, Father Simon, desperate measures. I managed to sell the autograph for over £50, and it helped me pay for food that month. Doesn't sound like a lot now, but at the time, it was a great deal. I had swapped Bobby for some chicken, a few pies, milk, a few vegetables and fruit, because that is what Sir Bobby would have wanted. No fags or booze, as that would have been very disrespectful. This played on my mind for years. And when I finally started to be slightly more financially secure, the guilt got so much, I paid over £85, that's £85, to get another framed Bobby Charlton autograph in order to replace it so that Kevin didn't know that I'd sold it in the first place. So, thank you, Kevin. I now own a genuine copy of the autograph, and you are exposed as a forger, and your fake now hangs in someone else's home. Another collector thinks he has a Bobby Charlton original when he doesn't. But don't worry, I forgive you. Our 30 years of friendship is too much to give up for a measly fake autograph. But the question is, does the Holy Trinity forgive me? And who committed the worst sin? Was it me? Or was it Kevin? Which is a very, very interesting idea. I'm not quite sure if we can measure one against the other. But anyway, interesting to get a PS, which also contains another confession. It's part 2 of the Bobby Charlton confession. Sister Susie, what do you say?
Well, I think, Richard, that you didn't know it was a forgery, so you sold it with genuine intention that it was genuine.
That
and
is
I
true.
think that that's I don't think, you know, if you knew it was a forgery and then sold it, then that's a different matter. However, yeah, I just still don't forgive Kevin from last week, because now another person is sitting at home thinking they've got a genuine Bobby Charlton signed photograph, and they don't. So, yeah, I'm going to forgive Richard, because I don't think he did anything wrong.
Okay, brother from another gutter.
It truly is. It's an ecumenical dilemma, this one, isn't it? Where someone has been wronged and then does something where they are wronging someone else, and who really is to blame? Which of us can possibly cast the first stone there? And I would say, I mean, he's 35 quid down on the deal, isn't he? Because he sold it for 50 quid and then bought another one for 85 quid. So I think he's learned his lesson, and they're all still friends. So in a way, aren't we all the winners, in a way?
Are we?
Apart from Manchester United, who not won. So for that reason, I'm going to forgive.
Kevin is 35 quid down on the deal.
Richard is.
Richard is, and Richard.
Yes.
Very good.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's irrelevant.
Yes, it is.
It's the people's verdict, please. Do you forgive Richard? 61054 for the people's verdict. Start your message with Simon. That would be a nice thing. So the people's verdict, please, in the next hour for our fantastic album tracks hour. 61054. Start your message with Simon. Forgiveness or no? We had a confession just before 6 o'clock. It was a PS on last week's Bobby Charlton and the fake Bobby Charlton autograph confession. This time it was for Richard, who tells us that once he'd been given that fake autograph, he then sold it, not knowing it was a fake. But then later on, he bought the real thing anyway. His mate's a forger, but he's got the real thing. It cost him 85 quid. The people's verdict is in. Here it is.
So Zach in Luton says, forgiven. I agree with Susie. I feel sorry for Richard. He had no idea the Bobby Charlton signature was a fake. Gary in Lincoln, forgiven. The silly thing about this is if Kevin and Richard weren't so desperate to not upset the other one, none of this would have happened. Kevin would have never faked the signature, and Richard wouldn't have bought another Bobby Charlton signature after selling the first one. And Jeff in Halifax says, forgiven. Richard wasn't to know, although what is funny is knowing that everyone listening who bought a second-hand Bobby Charlton autograph is right now wondering if they have the fake.
That is very true. Your confession, please, if you fancy the smart speaker. Confessions at greatesthitsradio.co.uk. And it's 5:46. Thank you very much indeed for all the confessions which have been coming in. And we have a very fine selection, I think. Let me just check in with Sister Susie, who's producing the show from the pub, as ever.
The trolley.
Behind this, David Jacobs Memorial Trolley going past there. The David Jacobs Drinks Trolley has also come to Greatest Hits Radio, and that's an amazing thing.
Yes.
Yes.
What have we grabbed from the trolley as it went past?
I've grabbed a nice bottle of orange wine, so slightly different today, but it's from Italy, and it's called Evelyn, and it uses the Verdicchio grapes, and it's very, very delicious. So
Is it actually orange?
It's actually orange, yeah.
It's not made from,
the
but
skin
it's not
contact.
made from oranges,
Not made from oranges, no, it's made from Verdicchio grapes.
as you just said.
Yeah.
All right, okay. I'm concentrating on the confession.
Yeah, of course.
So
course.
today's confession comes from Laura. Thank you very much, Laura, for this. Simon, Matt, Susie and the Confessional Collective. My confession goes back 500 million years.
Wow.
Give or take a couple of million, but more of that later. Back in the 1990s, a group of us used to go away every year for the early May bank holiday and rent accommodation somewhere in the southwest of the UK. The common bond was that all the guys had played rugby together, so it was always a full-on time, with little opportunity for sleeping, quiet contemplation, or keeping up to date with the Archers. Though quite why anyone would want to do that, I don't know. I fear that if they had come across your drinks trolley, then another confession might have been needed.
Right.
Very good, though. Entertainments included the game of Jugopoly, which was a variant of Monopoly, where rent was paid in drinks, not to the banker, but the landlord. Karaoke, with very little application of pitch, tone, or indeed ability to follow the words. And the favourite every year, the day trip out to a surprise destination. This particular year, it was the turn of my then partner, now husband, and I, to organise the year's annual event, and we chose the beautiful Dorset town of Swanage, renting 2 cottages either side of an old alleyway. An enjoyable time was had by all, and I'm sure that many apologies are due for many things, including drinking all the gin on the Swanage Steam Railway, such that the train's departure from Corfe Castle had to be delayed whilst the guard popped off to the local supermarket for more supplies for our return trip. But I digress. I have to say, I feel sorry for the conductor, whose job is not to keep you... If you've drunk all the gin, well, there's no more gin.
Yeah, sorry.
There's no more. Yeah,
Anyway.
sold out.
So, where are we? Oh, yes. Eventually, the big day came along, and there was a buzz of anticipation at breakfast. What had we organised? Where would we take everyone? How many pubs were nearby? Eventually, we set off, arriving at our destination on Kimmeridge Beach on the Jurassic Coast. We all marched onto the beach, and I have to say, not everyone in the party seemed as enthusiastic as we were. Some even thought that the activity might involve skinny dipping in the freezing sea. Back off, rugby players. Little did they know what excitement was in store. Then the big reveal. We were all going fossil hunting. And to make it even more enjoyable, we had hired the services of a local fossil expert who arrived and handed everyone a small hammer to go about their searches. Unfortunately, I cannot remember the gentleman's name, so let's just call him Jurassic John, or JJ to his friends. So JJ was brilliant, full of enthusiasm, skipping from one oversized rugby player to the next, helping with fossil identification and suggesting where to apply the best hammer blows. We breathed a sigh of relief. The group were enjoying it, and there was no threat of having to attend the notorious kangaroo court for a failed day out. This was a success, and as the light started to fade, we returned our hammers to JJ and, not surprisingly, made our way to the nearest pub to compare our finds and seek pain relief for all the misdirected hammer blows. Well, this is the point where I am seeking forgiveness, Father Simon. Our group might have thought that I was late to join everyone in the pub as I was saying goodbye to JJ. The reality of it was that I had secretly gone in a local fossil shop and purchased a very fine specimen fossil, an orthokeratite, if you're interested.
Okay.
Orthokeratite. Could be orthoceratite, not sure. I covered it with a bit of fresh mud to make it look as if I'd just picked it up.
Yeah.
And that became my find for the day. Everyone was amazed. Their broken bits of ammonite and bits of stone that were obviously not fossils simply could not compare. I was the hero for the next 20 years. When people came to visit our house, they would see my orthoceratite or orthokeratite
one of those.
proudly displayed, and we would talk about the great fossil hunting day. Father Simon, I seek some forgiveness from my friends for the deception and gloating, but in my mitigation, if they had simply turned the fossil over, they would have seen the price label under the newly applied mud. My real plea for forgiveness is from the fossil, who I completely misrepresented. The poor creature had not lived in Dorset, but Morocco. It was in a bed of granite, not the limestone of Kimmeridge. It was from the Devonian period, not the Jurassic. For such a series of deceits, I am hoping that dear orthoceratite still on display in my dining room will forgive me. Which is interesting, asking a fossil's forgiveness. That hasn't happened before. But an excellent confession. I like that very much. Let's check in with Sister Susie first of all.
Well, Laura, I like that you've paid a lot of attention in going to the pubs and drinking all the gin, and as a landlady I very much appreciate that. However, I do think you could at least taken the label off the fossil. Like, that's not really much commitment there, is it? I do think, I don't know if you'll get forgiveness from the fossil, but from your mates, I just don't think you just shouldn't have done it, really, should you? You should have just admitted that you also just found a stone that wasn't a fossil, but you had a good day anyway, and that's fine.
I think the fact that the fossil was completely misrepresented, I think the fossil is going to be pretty stony-faced.
Oh, very good.
Anyway, brother.
Well, I mean, it's made it this far, hasn't it? It made it 500 million years. I'm sure it can deal with being misrepresented by Laura, and also she left the label on. It was almost as if she wanted to get caught. That would be my feeling there. And also, I think the people asking for forgiveness should be the fossil store. What on earth? They're on the Jurassic Coast. What are they doing selling fossils from Morocco? Should be on the Jurassic... They're all there. It's called the Jurassic Coast after your park. So for that reason,
the British should only sell British fossils.
Yes, they'll be selling Jurassic fossils on the coast.
All right.
For that reason, I choose to forgive.
Okay, so I can't follow that. Anyway, so the issue is, do you forgive Laura or not? Who knows what the orthoceratite is going to be thinking at a moment of crisis like this? But do you forgive Laura for her fossil-based confession? On the text, please, 61054. First word is Simon. Moments ago, in fact, just before the 6 o'clock news, we had tonight's confession from Laura, who, by her own admission, completely misrepresented a fossil. She said it had lived in Dorset. It hadn't. It was lived in Morocco. It was in a bed of granite, not the limestone of Kimmeridge. It was from the Devonian period, not the Jurassic, as she claimed. And she wanted forgiveness from the orthoceratite. Orthokeratite. The orthokeratite is what she wanted forgiveness from. Well, she might have got forgiveness from the fossil. Did she get forgiveness from the good folk of the UK? Let's check in here.
So Ian in Barnsley says, forgiven. Surely they should have noticed it wasn't real. And I agree with Matt.
It was real.
Selling fossils from Morocco, whatever next. Kevin in Newtown Abbey says, she took Jurassic measures, but made me laugh. Can you dig me? And Jody says, I totally forgive. I did the same thing to my husband. He wanted an off-fossil hunting trip in Whitby whilst I went shopping. What he didn't know was that I'd bought a shark tooth in our hometown of Chesterfield before we went. Before I met him after the fossil hunt, I went onto the beach and rolled it in some sand. He totally believed me, and I only confessed when he was going to send it to the paleontologist.
Well, that's a terrific story, and Laura has kept this up for 20 years.
20 years.
People still come to our house and go, I like that fossil, the orthokeratite fossil that you have there.
Yes.
Anyway, maybe you faked your competition entry or something like that in a light-hearted way.
Yes.
Not in an illegal way. Maybe you won something which you really shouldn't have. Anyway, if you have a confession, we would like to exchange it for a smart speaker. Send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk.